Hi guys, welcome to today's YouTube video. Today's video is how to do a relationship checkup during quarantine. Now, I've already done one relationship YouTube video on, it's called Coronavirus in Your Relationship. And in that YouTube video, I just talk about how to help your relationship. What are some things that you need to understand while you're kind of in quarantine or social isolating? And really, it's how you manage your stress, understanding that both of you are different and you might handle stress differently, and that's okay. How are you nurturing and caring for one another? And so really, I want to take some time and look at that piece. Like, how are you nurturing and still connecting to your relationship while you're in quarantine? And, you know, I get asked this question a lot, like when you're around all the time, you might be getting more frustrated, or you might have these dreams of, oh, we've always wanted all this time together and now it's not what we expected. And then other times or for other couples, it's, it's a really good thing. So everybody's on the spectrum when it comes to what's going on with their relationship in the midst of quarantine. And wherever you're at, I think some of these tools that I'm going to mention today are going to be helpful. So really, it's, again, asking yourself and your partner this question of, how are we nurturing and still connecting in our relationship in the midst of quarantine or social isolating? As I've said in many of my other videos regarding the pandemic, what we once were doing for self-care or even relationship care, we might not be able to do in the exact same way. So for couples, it's really time to start getting creative, and taking some time and saying, okay, well, maybe we were used to do this thing over here and now we're just not able to do that. So what can we do instead that's still helpful and still ways that are very nurturing in our relationship? So first question is, what have we learned so far? What have we learned about ourselves, and what have we learned about each other, and what have we learned about our relationship? What are the things that we really like, and where are our strengths? What are the things that we are exploring or that we're doing that we either one didn't do before or we hadn't done in a really long time and we're doing now? What have been some challenges, and what's surrounding those challenges? Maybe there's been some conflict or some heat. The heat's been turned up in a way that's not so great. So what are some challenges that really keep fueling the fire of conflict, of distance? What are some fears about when the pandemic or when the quarantine, social isolating is lifted? What are some fears around that? And how are we going to handle some of the conflict maybe a little bit differently? Or what are we not saying that actually needs to be addressed? So those are a lot of questions, I know, but these are some things that are really important. And again, I'll just say, what are we learning? What's worked for us? What do we like? Where are our strengths? What are we doing that maybe we didn't do before? Or what are we remembering that we liked? How are we asking questions differently to really get to know each other in a way that we haven't either ever or in a long time? And what have been some challenges? What are some fears around when quarantine is lifted? Or, what have been some areas that have really created lots of conflict? And what are the things that maybe we haven't said that need to be said? So those are some things that you guys can do a couples meeting, as I've talked about before, and just start communicating with one another. And this doesn't have to be something that you do every day. And actually I wouldn't. I just would have a couples meeting, and talk about this. And if you're finding that you're going in loops or you get stuck or more conflict is created, then I would definitely recommend getting a couples therapist. And the other thing is, going back to the kind of start of the question is, how are you connecting or nurturing your relationship now? So what have been some ways that you have been nurturing your relationship? And when I say nurturing your relationship, it's really just caring for. When you're around each other all the time, we still might forget or take for granted what's going on. So nurturing your relationship can be, are you guys going on walks together? Are you still finding ways to laugh together? How are you creating time for intimacy? And, you know, I get those of you who may have kids or family members living with you, that might be really, you know, how are we going to do that? There's no privacy. And so making sure that you really make some time for one another. You know, it's okay to still experience pleasure together, and, you know, and carving that time out. And you can get creative, especially if you have a lot of people in your house. And creativity makes that intimacy even more fun. So, you know, those are some things. You know, how are you still creating joyful moments? You know, I've said it in most of my other videos. Dr. John Gottman, he even has a relationship app. It's called the Gottman Card Decks, and get that out and play with, you know, ask each other the questions that are in those card decks. There's questions really to get to know each other better, or to remind yourself of what you already know. You know, make a list of things that you really want to do together, even in the midst of quarantine. Again, get creative with each other. You know, these are all things that are really good for your relationship. And when you're discussing, you know, what you've learned and what you like, this can also be part of how you want to nurture your relationship even after quarantine. Like, what are the things that you have learned about one another that maybe you didn't know before? And what do you want to continue to do even when social isolating is over and you're starting to reintegrate? You know, as I've said, another thing to do is to ask yourself what's working and what are some things that we just need to let go of. And I know this kind of goes back to the first question, what have you learned? But really it's, you know, I've heard many different stories of things that couples are really liking. Well, we are taking more time for one another, or we have more special time. And then on the kind of other end of this, it's, well, we have too much time together. And so, you know, I'm learning things about my partner that I didn't know before, and maybe I didn't want to know. And so it's, what are things that we need to let go of? And the other piece is, when we are under a significant amount of stress, especially the stress that's out of our control, it tends to kind of turn up the heat of irritability or frustration, because you're stressed out. Maybe you're not sleeping as much. And so, you know, you really want to take some time to say, okay, I know that I'm feeling a little bit extra irritable or frustrated, or I'm exhausted. And so I need to, maybe if my partner didn't take out the trash today, I need to let that go instead of getting a huge fight about it. And let your partner know how you're feeling that day, especially if you're recognizing that you're feeling a little bit more irritable. And then the last thing that I think is really important to discuss as you're creating ways to nurture your relationship is, what are you dreaming of after this is done? You know, I think you guys coming together and really talking about what your dreams are after you're able to, you know, kind of get out and travel, or, you know, go back to work, or, you know, whatever it is. What are you dreaming of after quarantine is over? And I think that's important. And you don't have to put a timeline on that. Actually, I wouldn't, because we don't know. And so it's how, you know, what are we dreaming of individually, and what kind of dreams do we want to create in our relationship after quarantine is done? Okay? So, and also just remember, focus on what's in your control instead of what's out of your control. You know, focus on how you're managing that stress and how you guys are communicating with one another. All of those things are really important. And again, I say that in the first relationship video. But in this video, I really want you to focus on how you're nurturing your relationship, what you've learned, what are some of your strengths, what have been some challenges, what are your fears, how you're connecting and taking care of your relationship, you know, doing special time, creating time for intimacy, making sure that pleasure is included in that, and getting out the Gottman card decks and talking to one another. You know, just some of those things are really important. What's working and what do you need to let go of? And then what are you dreaming about? So those are some tips on how to care for your relationship in the midst of self-quarantine or self-isolating. All right, guys, I hope you have a great day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for weekly updates all about relationships. Take care.